If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Welcome to Special News Channel. Russian President Vladimir Putin's reputation war in Ukraine continues at full speed. Putin came to the point of ending his political career because of the war in Ukraine. After the last attacks of the Kiev army, the Russian troops were deeply wounded and had to retreat from the Ukrainian cities they had occupied. The Ukrainian armed forces has changed its war tactics, especially in the last period. In this war, where airstrikes came to the fore, the Ukrainian Air Force launched intense attack operations on the invading troops with unmanned aerial vehicles. In addition, the Kiev soldiers supported these attacks with ground operations. Ukraine has brought its decisive battle to the forefront in recent weeks, with an all-out struggle. On the other hand, looking at the point reached in the war in Ukraine and Syria does not seem to end in the short term. The so-called special military operation in Ukraine went extremely badly for the leader Vladimir Putin. There is no doubt that the Russian leader is under pressure. The Kremlin admitted it had lost significant numbers of soldiers. The Moscow army quickly retreated and lost the recently occupied Ukrainian territory. Putin declared mobilization throughout Russia due to the impossibilities of the Moscow army. On the one hand, sanctions against the Russian economy continue. It is clear as daylight that the decision to invade was a fundamental mistake. However, the part of what more he can do to win this war, which has become an existential situation for Putin, is quite thought-provoking. We can say that the war between Ukraine and Russia has entered a complex period. But endless war means endless resources. Russia does not seem to have this ammunition. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, took advantage of the Russians' lack of ammunition and accelerated their counterattacks. Recently, the striking operation launched by Kiev soldiers in the city of Melitopol left its mark on the agenda. Melitopol, which had been under Russian occupation since the beginning of March, had fallen in the first months of the war. The Kiev army took action in response to the regular attacks of Russian troops on Ukrainian infrastructure. Vladimir Putin was stunned after a series of nighttime attacks by Ukrainian forces on Russian-occupied cities in the eastern region. Ukraine launched an offensive against Melitopol, which was under Russian occupation. It has been reported that, as a result of Ukrainian artillery attacks in the city of Melitopol in Zaporizhia Oblast, about 200 Russian soldiers lost their lives. A total of 10 bombing operations carried out by the Ukrainian army with HIMARS, known as the God of the War, destroyed the Russian military infrastructure. Footage taken at the scene shows the military neighborhood engulfed in a fierce flame. Some images of a large fire in the city were also served by the Russian authorities. In the attack carried out by Ukraine with HIMARS rockets, all of the areas turned into barracks for Russian soldiers were in ruins. It was also among the information that a military base used as a barracks by the soldiers of the Moscow army was blown up, and at this point was also used by the Russian mercenary company Wagner. In the attack of the Ukrainian forces on the strategic city of Melitopol in the south under Russian occupation, the former resort and hotel complex in the city, next to a church known as Hunter's Halt, which was converted into a barracks for Russian soldiers, was destroyed. Locals state that about 200 Russian soldiers were killed in the attack, while some sources claim that more than 300 people were killed. Wounded Russian soldiers were probably taken to Crimea for medical treatment, as local hospitals were full. This attack could signal the beginning of Ukraine's winter offensive, and Melitopol stands at the key point of the all-out offensive. For this reason, the success of the attacks in Melitopol is of vital importance for Ukraine. Yevgeny Balitsky, the governor of the Zaporizhia region appointed by Moscow, said in a statement shared on his own account that air defense systems intercepted 2 missiles, but 4 missiles reached their targets. On this subject, Balitsky said that he suffered heavy losses in the attack carried out by Ukraine with HIMARS missiles. Other explosions were also reported in cities such as Sevastopol, in Simferopol, and in other occupied areas such as Crimea. Vladimir Putin made real threats, warning that any attack on areas under the control of the Moscow army would be met with a military response by all means by Russia. Despite these threats from the Russian leader, the Ukrainian administration has reiterated that it will retake all the lost territories, including Crimea, which was lost to Russia in 2014. A surprising response came from Ukraine as Russia targeted Odessa overnight, while the Moscow army continued to target critical infrastructure facilities in Ukraine. On the orders of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, another big blow came to Russia. Russian leader Putin seems to be very difficult to account for this. Ukraine destroyed the targets of the Russian invaders, which were used as barracks in the city of Melitopol with HIMARS rockets. Thousands of homes were left without electricity due to Russia's attacks targeting Ukraine. Due to the latest drone attacks on Odessa, Ukraine counterattacked, and the Kiev administration pressed the button. The Ukrainian army targeted the Russian-occupied Melitopol with missiles. In the attack, the barracks used by Russian mercenary company Wagner were blown up by the Ukrainian army. Russian President Vladimir Putin had a night of nightmares. Since October, Moscow was targeting Ukraine's electricity grid. Kiev admitted last Friday that some of the country's thermal and hydroelectric power stations were damaged. While Zelensky explained that the attacks were war crimes targeting civilian life, Moscow still claimed that they were militarily legitimate. It has been reported that Russian drones attacked the southern port city of Odessa in Ukraine, leaving the city and its surroundings without electricity. In the wake of the attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that about 1.5 million people were left without electricity, and regional authorities urged residents whose homes are only powered by electricity to leave the city. The statement shared by the Ukrainian authorities mentioned not days but weeks and possibly even 2 to 3 months for repairs to be made and electricity restored. Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the situation in the Odessa region is quite difficult. In the sharing of the Ukrainian armed forces, it was stated that 15 Russian unmanned aerial vehicles were launched in and around Odessa and 10 of them were shut down. Ukraine's public prosecutor's office announced that 2 power plants were targeted. The prosecution stated that the drones are Iranian-made Shahed 136 type. Iran has become one of Russia's biggest military supporters since the invasion of Ukraine, according to an intelligence update from the UK's Ministry of Defence published on Twitter last Saturday.